Hello everyone. How is everyone doing today? We're so excited to have you again back with us. Hope everyone is enjoying and having a good weekend and hopefully uh, inclined to learn something more. We will be having lots of discussion today. We'll be talking about technical topic, behavioral concept, and hopefully people are enjoying and learning something new. Happy Diwali to everyone. Exactly. That's Diwali in India, day after tomorrow, but the celebration obviously have started. I have also to do some cooking for my home, so I'll be doing that. Some sweets. Hopefully, it would be good. My son would like it. But yeah, that's an interesting time of the year. Most of the time, people would be visiting their hometown and meeting parent family. So it's a nice place. It's like Christmas for India, isn't it? So thanks everyone for still being here. I know you have a lot of priorities, a lot of festival things to take care of, and if you're still here, we appreciate your passion, we appreciate your support for the program, and hopefully we would be able to give you the value for the time you are investing with us. And feel free for giving feedback, feel free to share content on the other channels if you want to. So thanks everyone, and let me welcome Jamila and James. Thank you, Jamila. Thanks, James, for being here. So we will start in the manner like we have used to do these things. What we will do, we will start with the technical track, which I will be presenting, and then we would be going over to a serverless track where James would talk about observability, very important aspect, and then we would have a guest speaker lined up, and then Jamila would be asking some intriguing question, and you would be getting a different view of the life outside of AWS and inside the AWS, both type of things you probably would be able to observe. So hopefully everyone is enjoying, and let me get started without wasting any time. Keep your feedback coming. We are interested to listen to the feedback. Unless we know what we are doing wrong or what could be improved, unless somebody tells us, we would never know. So keep your feedback coming and feel free to share these details with other people. uh, we are getting lots of requests for one-to-one session, and we are doing it our full capacity. We have people lined up for interviews and we are trying to help them out. And if you also have an interview lined up, maybe you cleared first round, you need little more detail for the second round, maybe you just need little more motivation, so reach out to any of us and we would be happy to help you out. Okay, so thank you, and I'll get started here. I'll let you focus on the content part so that you would have a better understanding on all the topic, and keep your questions coming. James and Jamila would be answering questions, and we would be then able to answer as many questions as we have. I'm also monitoring the chat, so I would be also able to answer some of the questions as we move forward. Okay, now I want to start this session with a quote here. That is from Edward Deming. Probably a lot of people know about him because if you are in data analytics, then this person was a well known name. And he says that without data, you are just another person with an opinion. How true it is. Data is the most important aspect of lots of things we do on day to day today. Right. So the slide looks a little blurry. Maybe you have to check your internet bandwidth. Uh, Sank, Snack, maybe you have to check. Hopefully, everyone else is seeing the slides properly. It's not a lot of graphic, it is just a picture and a text. Hopefully, others are seeing graphics properly. Let me know if everyone is seeing things properly. You see it clearly? Thanks for confirming. Okay, so without data, you are just another person with an opinion. Now, I like another quote. This is from Jim Barksdale, another well known name in analytics, that if we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine, isn't it? I obviously that give more weightage to my own opinion, and only differentiator between my opinion being right or someone else would be the data which is available for you to analyze, right? So data analysis has become a very, very important aspect of day-to-day modern businesses. Like somebody has said before, that data is the new oil. I don't want to go into debate of whether it is or not, but basically idea is that, hey, companies who have data, who can analyze the data, not just having data but who could analyze the data, would be able to thrive. They would be able to get more insight, they would be able to address their customer needs and would have better impact on their customer life. So data is becoming very important aspect. Now, when we talk about data, sometimes we think that data is a small quantity or small in number, but let me give you some examples so that you could relate to that how complicated data collection and processing could be. Let me start by giving some example from some of the AWS customers. Viber is a very well-known customer of AWS. It's one of the most popular messaging app. This is Viber. This is what Viber is doing in every 60 second. Imagine the scale. Every 60 second in Viber, 3 million messages are being sent. 140,000 calls are happening, 1.2 million users, 2,000 new user login, join, 300,000 stickers, 10,000 group chats, and last is my favorite, 1.5 million photos sent. Imagine the volume. Imagine this happening every second, every day, every minute, every week, every year. Consider how much data you are getting collected with. Right. So 60 seconds in Viber. Now this is messaging. We expect it to happen. Let's take an example from FINRA. FINRA is a regulatory authority in US. Probably if you do any type of stock transactions into US, FINRA is governing it. FINRA is ensuring that the market is integrated, market is not having fraud type of things, so they perform a lot of validation on the transaction which happens all over the US. 75 billion market event, this is happening every day. 50,000 files. When this transaction happen, the broker dealers which are working with FINRA, they upload those transaction details into files, and those file has to be processed to perform validity checks and other type of thing. They have 200 rules to format files, and half a trillion validation happen each day. Imagine how much data is coming up and how complicated the system could be. Right now, so keep this thing at your mind that the data is, yeah, Finance Industry Regulatory Authority, exactly, FINRA is the one. And thanks for sharing that. So hopefully you get the idea that volume which is coming up. Now, collecting data is one aspect, but getting value from that data is a different aspect altogether. So finding value in data is a journey. Let me explain what I mean by this quote here. That when you want to collect data, probably initially your request was only for business monitoring, that you wanted to have only become do business monitoring there. Then what you would do is, in this case, when you collect data and you want to just monitor your business, probably SQL queries would be good enough to get you started. Most of the things you want to achieve, SQL would be able to give you, so that is good enough. But when you move forward, when you want to get business insights from your data, maybe same set of SQL query may not give you the result you are expecting. So what you may have to do, you may have to evolve the tools and the methods you are using, and then only you would be able to get some insight from that data. Right, so that is important. Next, that data, when you further process, that would give you business optimization information. When you are able to get more value out of that, you may be having idea about new business opportunities which you could leverage, and then you may be able to transform your business completely. But up to reach to this end of spectrum, you won't be relying on SQL. You would be needing lots and lots of AI ML related services, and then only you would be able to get the value which is coming out of your data. Right. So hopefully this thing is clear that the data may be basically available for SQL queries, but if we want to derive values, we may have to perform a lot of transformation on that. That is a question from Ghanshyam. Do I have to focus on any specific set of AWS services? If possible, kindly explain in detail. So probably some would be answering you in Ghanshyam, but yeah, there is not specific thing unless you are entering into a specialist essay role. There are a generalist essay, specialist essay. Specialist essay would be on machine learning, maybe on artificial intelligence, maybe on data analytics. So that time you may need those concepts, but knowing a service in and out, probably it may not be a requirement for L4, L5, maybe L6 it could be, but it depends. Right. Thank you. Now, coming back to the code, data is new oil. Why I'm using this, I'm trying to compare some of the things between oil industry and data. It's not very different. Oil and gas industry, if we talk about, there is a mining happening, means somebody is getting that oil coming out of earth, out of ocean bed. We are getting that oil. Oil in its raw format is not usable. You cannot just use that raw format thing and get started in your vehicle. What you have to do, you have to go ahead and lots of filtering and processing is required. So obviously you get raw thing, you then filter and process it, then you may need the distribution mechanism, right? Maybe these wells are in Middle East somewhere, maybe into Arabian Sea somewhere, maybe Indian Ocean somewhere, and you want to get that oil pumped to a station of delivery. So distribution is required on that, and you would be then sending it to consumer so that from petrol pump or gas station they could consume it. So similar kind of concept apply into our industry of data also. We will talk about that in a minute. But hopefully, mining, filtering, distribution, consumption, these are similar thing which we will be doing with the data also. And the oil industry or gas industry, they work with pipeline, so they have a lot of pipeline set up, and through pipeline they supply the resources, they supply the crude oil, and then after filtering, the actual oil is there coming up, or from Nord Stream, you would have lot of gas coming up. Similarly, you may set up a data pipeline also. So keep the pipeline concept behind your mind, and let's talk about data pipeline now, how data pipeline works. ETL, Venkat, is one type of the thing which you may do it, but yeah, it's not always ETL. There are other things also. We'll discuss them as we move forward. So the pipeline which we have saw is similar pipeline I may have is about the data pipeline. If you are seeing this thing here, what I'm representing here, that I have a data source. All my data, technically it is just ones and zeros, and those ones and zeros are coming into my application, and through this I am able to process it. So this data is coming from different sources. These sources could be on premises, could be in cloud, doesn't matter. It could be different type of sources I am connecting into. So for all these, all the ones and zeros are coming to me, and now I want to process the data as it comes to my environment. So hopefully this thing is clear. All my ones and zeros is what I am looking forward to. Okay. Then once I have my data collected from on-prem and cloud, I have to bring this data into the location where processing would happen. Like you get oil, you do mining, and then you get that oil extracted. That oil has to be bought into refinery for further processing. Similarly, you have to set up some ingestion mechanism so that you could bring your data, and once you bring data, you would need a store to keep your data stored and keep it secured. So that's what we would be looking for. So store and secure is very important aspect you have to look into. And then once your data is available in your in your processing units, you would be doing something called catalog and processing on it. What is a catalog? If you don't understand, don't worry, we'll discuss them in detail. What is a catalog? And then we will doing lot of processing on the data. Afterward, once you have a data which is in the format you are looking for, which is optimized for searching, optimized for analysis, you would then start searching and analysis that data. And probably not everyone wants to write SQL queries, and they want to see things into a dashboard format, like a CEO executives, C-level executive. So we may want to put it into visualization through dashboard or create reports. So hopefully this gives you an idea that how we actually start with this pipeline. Any questions, anyone here? Any confusions here? Does this process in real time? It depends. It depends on it, right? So Ronnie, it may happen that you may want some data to be processed real time. Let's say this pipeline is for a flight radar. Now, if it is a flight radar, obviously I want it to be real time. Otherwise, it won't work for me. But if this is my monthly sales data, which I am putting on a dashboard or creating a report, that time it would be batch. So when I'm talking about ingestion, ingestion can happen into two phases. I could have a batch ingestion, means on a specific time I may ingest the data, maybe weekly, maybe monthly, maybe yearly, it depends. And then you would have another type of ingestion which could be real time. So it depends on what type of data it is. Like if you have heartbeat data coming from patients in ICU, you want it in real time, right? You can't do it in batch processing. But if it is like a sales record data, or maybe the product sold in last hour, then maybe I am okay with have a batch analysis on that. So it would depend on what kind of data it is, and based on that we would move forward, right? So hopefully this thing is clear and you are able to understand the concepts. Let's now see how the analytics pipeline stays in AWS, or what services in AWS can help you into analysis. So data pipeline you could build on your own in any other environment too. We are focusing here right now on some of the analytics services which AWS has to offer, and we will see them, right? So your data could be coming from on-prem or cloud. Now this on-prem could be your AWS environment, sorry, on-prem could be your data center, or it could be a other cloud provider, it doesn't matter. Cloud could be AWS, cloud could be others, but you have some mechanism of where the data is being collected. That data would require ingestion. And for ingestion, what I could have done, I may have used services like DMS, which is our uh, this is what is our DMS service, that is my database migration service. Then we have Kinesis. So Kinesis is what we would be utilizing here. And then we would be having a Snow family, which you may want to bring data into a standard way. That is what we in a physical format. So that is where Snow family will become. Would DynamoDB be a possible data stores? Why not? Why not? Let's say you are collecting all your orders into DynamoDB, it can become a source. If you're collecting all your log data into S3, yes, it can become a source. No problem at all on that. So these are representation. Sometimes you may find that, hey, my S3 is appearing in source and it is appearing in data store also. And maybe I would run that on this. So it will depend, right? So that is possible. DynamoDB can come here. Redshift S3 RDS or EC2 could be anything. It could be anything where your data is residing. It depends, right? All right, let's move forward. So we would have ingestion. Ingestion will be done by a few services here, and these services sometime may be doing multiple things here. Then storage, you could do it into S3, you may do it into Redshift, you may do into RDS. Now probably Redshift could be a good solution if I am looking for something like data warehousing. So data warehousing is where maybe Redshift would be a good solution. If I'm trying to build a data lake, probably Amazon S3 would be a better solution in that case. So it depends what I'm trying to achieve, and depending on we would be utilized. Is Kinesis used for ingestion? Kinesis is a little complicated service. It is a stream. It is used for ingestion, but it allows you to do processing also. So processing can also happen through Kinesis. You would require a Lambda, but regularly Kinesis is used for ingestion regularly, but it can process too. Okay. Now, so data store, probably most of you know about S3 and Redshift or RDS. Then let's focus here, which is catalog and processing. Now, this is something where things go a little complicated because these become like a very standard data analytical terminology. So what we will be discussing, we'll be discussing some of them. And if you are looking for analytics, then you may use Athena, where you can run SQL query. You may run Elasticsearch, which can be used for performing lot of analytics and building dashboards, and you may display this data afterward into Amazon QuickSight, which will display your data into a visual format so your users can see all these things. So that's how AWS services map. Have I covered all the AWS services which are supporting an analytics? Probably not, but this one is covering the most important services or most popular services which people use. And today's discussion will be more focused on AWS Glue. Why I have chosen Glue, not Kinesis and all? Because Glue is multifaceted. Glue can help you in different aspect of your data analysis. It can do ETL, it can do machine learning, and that's why I have selected to talk about Glue. But yes, if time permits, so we will talk about other services also. So let's move forward and discuss about AWS Glue, what Glue is. From a definition perspective, I would call Glue as a fully managed extract, transform, and load service that make it easy to prepare and load your data for analytics. This word is used very commonly against in the data analytical world, which is called ETL. So you may have your data coming in different sources. Maybe you have a line of business application database. Maybe you have logs being collected. Maybe you have your audit report being collected. What I would need someone who could read data from all these sources, extract it. Now, this data may have some information which may be, let's say, in my sales database, I have values in dollar, I have values into pound, I have values into rupee, I have value into another format too. I want to extract these values and then transform it into dollar so that I could do a quick comparison between them. So I have to first do what? I have to extract that data, maybe transform that data into a way where my analysis system can understand, and then later what I would be doing, I would be hosting it again. I would be loading it into a database or a data lake or a data warehouse so that I could perform analysis on top of it. So that is what ETL is: extract data, transform it, perform some compute operation, and load it into a place which is a clean data, which is a customized data, and that is what you would use for performance or performing analysis. So that's what AWS Glue can help you in. Now, Glue, if I could rename it, I could have called it AWS Ginger. Why? Very odd name I am taking, but let me give you an idea why I am saying it. If you have seen Ginger, I'm pretty sure most of you have seen it. What happens with ginger, that ginger grows, but it is without any organic mechanism, or sorry, not a linear growth. See this ginger. What may happen that maybe the stem is smaller and the branch has become bigger, or one branch remains smaller and another branch become bigger, right? That is exactly same thing happens with glue also. It's not ginger, but the idea here is that glue has so many things that sometimes you may find that people are just using one part of it and calling it glue, but glue can help you with cataloging, processing, DevOps, quality control, all these type of thing. And these topics in on their own have very complicated discussion and lengthy discussions. So glue can give you lots of things. What it can do: cataloging. Catalog is your glue data catalog, glue crawlers. Then it can do processing for you. It has given you serverless Spark, so you can write your Spark code and run it. It support dynamic frame, so that also is a way to manipulate data into memory. Then glue streaming, if you have streaming job coming up, you could utilize them. And then we have ways where you can run your workflow using Studio. You have development endpoints where I could run my notebooks and get my application done. Workflows can be created, get data from point A, perform transformation, put it into B, then go into 3. That is all possible. You could do that. And on top, you could do quality control on that. So if I'm having lots of data which has duplicate records in that, or it has some similarities or anomaly detection, I may want to do that. And for all these things, we may need glue. So glue has lots and lots of component, and it can do wonders for you. It depends on which specific component you want to use from it. So you may say I would only use ETL. You may say I will only use catalog. I may use only ML powered data cleansing, nothing else. Right now what I'm focusing on, I am focusing on the catalog part of glue, and I will focus on what is glue data catalog, and I would talk about AWS glue crawler. I agree on that. Nothing impossible. Yeah, we never know what the name could be. Okay, so hopefully everyone is clear. Now let me focus on catalog and crawlers. Right. Now, if you know me, I don't want to see technology from technology perspective. I want to see things from real life perspective. And technology is always inspired from real life. So let's see that. Catalog is what I'm going to explain you, and I'll give you some examples so you could understand what a catalog is, and then I'll talk about a crawler. Right. Most of you have been to libraries, like probably when this WhatsApp, Facebook was not that popular. That time the way to learn something was mostly to go to library and read something. And if you're going to a library which is small, it's good enough. But if you end up into a library which is very huge, you may find millions of books there, different aisle, different type of sections, and then it would become nightmare to look for a specific book. Right. So let's say I decided, hey, I want to I want to learn something, or maybe I want to read an old classic. I want to run, I want to read Paradise Lost, which is from John Milton. So that is the book which I want to read. I like this book. This is an old classic and probably not everyone's taste, but yeah, I like that. So Paradise Lost from John Milton. Now there are millions of books. I can't keep on going into every aisle and look for what is available, look for my book, and then get to that book. That would be kind of impossible. I could still do it if I have all the time in the world, but I have to be little more smart in this case to find that book. So probably in these libraries which are like huge, what would be happening? You would be having a catalog. Catalog is not the book itself. Catalog is a reference, or I would say catalog is basically a metadata. Sorry, give me a minute. Catalog is basically a metadata. Metadata means it would have some information which will give me idea where the actual book is. So the catalog may have different fields. Maybe one of the field in that is fiction, or maybe I have a catalog created which is based on the author name or book name. So maybe I would be having a book name. Then it would have the author name also on that. So author name, then it may have your location, and in location it may have some detail that this is on to floor number 3, aisle number 5 4, rack number 8, and shelf number 15, and book number is 254. What is this? This is the metadata. So a catalog may contain book name, author, location of it. So instead of going into every aisle and searching every book, I would go into this catalog and search for the specific book I am looking for. Catalog doesn't contain the data, it just contains the metadata. I still have to go to floor 3rd, aisle 4, rack 8, shelf number 15 and get the book number 254 if I want to read that particular book which I'm looking for. So hopefully this thing is clear that metadata is basically a information about data, additional data information which will help me to understand what type of data it is. So glue also help you in creating a catalog. Exactly. Right. So what is this? This is book catalog. Now in today's world, probably book catalog won't be maintained into a physical book or physical diary or a physical notebook. It would be all digital. So I would be able to get all the component put together into a digital format, and then I would go into that, search for the book and get my book whatever I need to. Consider that if I expand this concept and I compile list of all the libraries in the world and then get their catalog into one central place. Isn't it easy? Wouldn't it be easier for everyone? Yes, it would be. But then I have to perform lots of things on top of it, isn't it? Because let's say into your US, all the books into English, so their catalog is into English. But maybe into Latin America, the libraries have their catalog in Spanish. So then we have to do conversion. Maybe here Swahili is the language for catalog. Maybe in India it was in Hindi. Maybe in Australia it was again in English. So I want to create a catalog, but I have to then convert all these languages into different format to one single format. So it would become easier. So somebody could come here and say, hey, I need this particular book, and then they would be given information that this book is available on these libraries, and is it currently available or not, that also you could see. So that is what we are doing here. We are creating a central catalog, and from that central catalog I would be able to get all the data, metadata, which I am looking for. The data would still be there, the book is still stored in US or in India, only the information is in the catalog. Hopefully everyone is clear that what a catalog is and how it actually works. So that was a concept. Let's implement this into Glue. Now we are focusing on something called Glue Data Catalog. So let's see what is a Glue Data Catalog. Glue Data Catalog is a placeholder. It is a place where your information about the data is stored. And what is the structure on this Glue Data Catalog? Let's see what is inside this catalog. The catalog is made up of databases. So databases would be there. I may have one database or n database, doesn't matter. And what databases are made up of, probably everyone knows about them. Databases are made up of table. So it would have metadata table. In one single database, I could have multiple tables, should not be a problem. And in my catalog, I may have my multiple databases also. So keep the structure in mind. In a catalog, there is a database, and in database, there are tables. Now, we want to get data from different data source. These are the source which Glue supports right now. S3, if you have your data into JSON, CSV, Parquet, or any other file format into Amazon, you could get it from there. That is a source. JDBC, that is a connection, and that connection could be on to an on-prem database or to a cloud database or to a different vendor's database, doesn't matter. If it speaks the language of JDBC, we should be able to grab that data. We have integration with DynamoDB, DocumentDB, MongoDB, and Delta Lake. These are all the sources. So source, if I'm saying, if my source is not there, maybe my data is still not in JDBC, maybe it is in log format. So I may have to bring that into S3, and then afterward, I could put information about that data into my catalog, should not be a problem. So these are the data sources. If you can connect through a JDBC, means technically every database can become a data source, whether on-prem, whether cloud, doesn't matter, right? So this data source is there. Now, one option to populate this metadata information or create values in the table is manually. So if you want, you could manually build information, and like in old days, a librarian would go to the when the new books arrive, it would read the detail of the book and enter that detail into a register so that everyone can afterward reads it. Today it may be a barcode scanner. You scan the barcode of the book and all the information is coming to your system automatically. So that's how we would be utilizing all these things. So create tables manually if you want to. If you want, no problem at all on that. Or you may use a feature of Glue, which is called Glue Crawler, who would help you to create these tables, right? So what is happening here that we should be able to utilize these things. What is the underlying database for Glue? We do not publish that, Raj, and it doesn't matter to customer. It may be Hive, it may be Presto, I don't know. We do not have that information officially published, that what is the underlying mechanism of it, right? See, if I go to McDonald's, I need my burger, that's all. Whether they used an air fryer for that, whether they have used a bun coming from Ireland or Switzerland, it doesn't matter. If the quality is same, if they give me SLA of 10 minutes and I get my burger in 10 minutes, I am worried only about that. So what is the internal mechanism? That is a secret sauce. They do not publish you the information. So maybe backend is some mechanism, could be Presto, could be something, but it is serverless exactly. So we don't have to worry about that. For every data source a new DB is created, it depends. You may say that, hey, I want to have one database and in that multiple table, so that is possible. You may say I want to have multiple databases for multiple tables. It is purely up to you. You decide. Mostly you will decide that, Parna, based on your boundary of access. So maybe if I have a sensitive table, I would probably keep it into a different database. If I have a common table which multiple people may be interested to access, probably I will keep it into one single database. So it would depend on your use case. So the crawler is the librarian who is actually reading the information about the book. He or she would not read the whole book, but it would be able to get basic information, and we could have added it into Glue. And to run crawler, we would again need a IAM role. That's how we would be able to talk to these data sources and get this data, right? So hopefully this thing is clear, and I would show a quick demo so you would understand how it works. Can we have multiple data sources? Why not, Venkat? It is possible. Let's say you have a finance application who generate logs, who create financial transaction in a database and then record the invoices into a PDF format. So that is multiple data sources. You could go ahead and use that, should not be a problem. Data source should be dependent on variety of data. It depends. Yes, exactly. So it depends. So let me now quickly go into console and quickly show you a demo about how Glue would be helping you to create a catalog. I may be a little faster here because I have limited time, but yeah, if there are any question afterward, if you rewatch it and have any question, feel free to reach out to me. Should not be a problem. For simplicity, what I'm doing, I am not going to very complicated data set. I am just utilizing very basic data set so that we can get started faster. What I have already uploaded two files into S3, and I would be then seeing information in that file. I'll quickly show you what these files contain, and then I will crawl them through crawler, and then we will be seeing the data inside it. So I am getting into that sample data set, and I have my customers data. So I have two files here. One is a customer.csv and there is a sales.csv. These are the two CSV file. What I have in that, some random customer data. It's a dummy data. Don't worry, these are not real person or not real addresses. So this is what I have. So I have name of the customer, email address, city, and all these type of stuff. And then I have some sales data, again some fake data, which is talking about different type of parts and all these things which we have sold. So that is the two files which I want. What I have done, I have kept these file into some bucket, or let's go ahead and create a bucket and we would start everything from scratch. So you would know there is no magic happening behind, there is no smokes and mirrors. All right, so I'm into S3. I am creating a bucket here and we will just call it BeSA demo glue. And what is today? Is 2210. So that's what we have created. I am putting it into Ireland, but it bucket could be anywhere, should not be a problem. And I'm saying let me create my bucket. Once my bucket gets ready, I may want to go ahead and upload some data inside it. So this is my BeSA demo, and I would upload those two CSV file inside it. Okay. Not desktop, document, project, sorry, no training. Give me a minute, I'll not show all the things to you and directly bring those files. Building data lakes, sample data set, and I have a file customer.csv. That's what I am adding. That file would be added, and then I am adding sales.csv. So these two files I am adding, and I say upload. So my files are ready. Now what I know there are files, but I do not know if there is some data inside it. So for this, I would go to Glue and get started from there. Now, you could create the database first and then create a crawler, or the crawler itself would give you option to create the database. So it depends on your use case what you prefer to get started with. So I would go and quickly create a database first. I have a custom DB. Let me delete that. I do not need it right now. Let me create a new database. I am in Ireland. I am creating a database here and I am calling it customer DB. Right, location could be something I could provide, that optional. Description is optional, and I will go ahead and say create a database. Once my database is ready, what I could do inside that, I could add a table manually, or I could add table using crawler. So I am interested to add table using crawlers. I am going to crawlers here and I would say okay, let's create a crawler. So I want to give it a crawler called customer crawler. I would be saying that, okay, tags and other things, that's okay. My data is not mapped, not yet. I have to add a data source. So I'm adding a data source here. Could be S3, could be something else as I mentioned to you. This is S3. I am going into a bucket in this account and I'm browsing for those bucket so that I could get data coming from it. So I've selected this BeSA, create. I could crawl all folders or exclude something. I'm adding S3 as a data source for myself. And then what I would be doing, that my crawler would be ready in a minute. So I added that, done. Then I could say I need a role, because obviously to read from S3, I need permission. So that is possible. Can we trigger glue based on S3 event? Absolutely. S3 event can trigger glue through a Lambda, not directly, but a Lambda would be required. Once I'm saying configure security setting and all, provided role, and I say, hey, create a customer, use the target database customer DB and create a table with starting prefix called customer underscore, just so that I could identify the tables when they created, and I could put a crawler to run on a schedule. So if I know that a schedule is required for my new data to be introduced, then I could do it. Otherwise, my crawler has been created. Right, so crawler is here. As you could see, crawler is ready. Now what I could do, crawler successfully created. It won't run automatically because I have said manually I would run it. So I would go ahead and say let me run this crawler. So I may take 5 more minutes, sorry for this, but yeah, let's see how the crawler runs. So let this crawler run. In the meantime, I am adding one more crawler, and intentionally I am bringing data from a external location. So I am calling it an external crawler. The S3 bucket which I read before was in my account. But right now I am intentionally going to a S3 bucket which is not in my account and which has additional data which I may be interested in. So my data source, I am adding it. Again, it is a S3 location. This is the bucket. And then I say, okay, let me go ahead and create a crawler here and let that crawler again require a role, associate a role. Go ahead, click next. I may select the same database, see this, but at this time I would give it a prefix to table so I could easily identify that. And once I'm there, I would go ahead and say create a crawler. So second crawler created for me. Then this crawler is ready. It is now going ahead. I would run this also. While this is running, if you see my customer crawler, it has finished. It took few seconds because the files were smaller. It is stopping and it has created two tables for me. What these two tables are, let's go ahead and see that. So let it stop and we would be seeing two tables being added into our database, which would have information about those CSV file which I have shown you before. So I'll go to my databases, one database, customer DB, and in that I may have some tables created if you see this. So I have given intentionally prefix customer CSV, customer sales CSV. So this is my CSV file, which was into a S3 bucket. I was able to read the CSV file, and this information I was able to get into a table. Let's see one of the table. Raj says if data source is on-prem, can glue crawler still work? See, it is purely depending on the connection. So in the JDBC, if you provided the connection of your on-prem database, why not? So as I said before, it could be working with on-prem also. It is just the program who is reading data. You need to give the connection and permission and it would work. No problem at all on that. Right. So you could see a table has been created for me and this is the schema of the table. This is not the data itself, but it is the information about data which says, hey, customer ID is a big int, email is a string, city is a string, country is a string, and from where all this information is coming up, it is coming from the customer.csv which we have uploaded. So see this, these were the field which it was able to identify, and these are being identified as the metadata values here. So it automatically identified all these things. Similarly, what could be else? Let's was my customer CSV. Let me go ahead and see some other tables also. That was my sales CSV. So let's go ahead and see the tables which were sales related, sales CSV. And here I would have the metadata information. Now, what I could do, I could modify that also. Maybe this data is where I don't want to expose the customer ID, or I don't want to give the sales information here. So what I could say, I'm not modifying my data, but I could modify the schema itself. So I could edit the table and I could say, okay, looks like I have to make some changes. I don't want anyone to see specific information about details. So I could remove that. So that is possible. I could modify the schema if I want to. So this is my schema. I may want to go ahead, modify table or modify the schema. If I'm modifying the schema, I could say, looks like I don't want anyone to know the order date for it. So let me go ahead and remove it. Be aware, I am not removing it from the actual data, only from the metadata I am removing it. Maybe my order line number is not important for me, so I could drop that. Similarly, I may add extra information if I want to. So that's how I could have updated the schema, and I could have a different version of schema now. As you could see, I could go ahead and see different version of schema also, as we see here. Right, so that version control is there inside glue catalog. So I have created my database, and in that I got my tables. I got another table which is from external data, right? Another crawler which we have kept on running. And if you see this one has different values, and this one is actually processing some Parquet files there. So this has read data from this S3 location, which is outside of my account, and it is able to identify information that there was a folder called 2017. There was 01, which is month, and then there are date related folders, and inside those folders we have gzip file, JSON file. As you could see, there are lots and lots of files which are there. So this is not keeping the file information. This crawler is keeping the metadata information on that. So this is my table. And if you see, it was able to detect the partitions. Partition means the folder structure on that. So that folder structure, I could modify and say, hey, I want to give a different name to that. I don't want to call it a partition one, but what I want it to call it year, right? I'm not making changes into specific data, but I am just adding value into that. So first partition, I would call it year. Second partition, maybe I would call it month. Third partition, I would call it as day. That is all possible. You could do that. So that what we did, we created a catalog, and once the catalog is ready, then we would be able to perform further analysis on it, maybe run ETL. Maybe if you see here, I could do a Glue Studio based job, interactive session can be created, notebook can be triggered, and then I could have blueprint created from it. So there can be lots of things can be happen. Is this edit option for all role I am specific? It depends. The role I have used, I is having all permission on glue, but you could say that permission given to is only to crawl, but not to edit. So that is possible. It is all controlled through IAM, right? So hopefully you are clear. That catalog basically crawls your data source and keeps your information about metadata into the table. And based on that, once your metadata is available, you could point all your dashboarding application, your ETL job, your Spark code into ETL, into databases here, and that would be then actually able to perform all the operation. All right. So I'll stop here in the interest of time, but hopefully everyone has got little more idea on Glue and catalog. Glue is very complicated service. There are lots of things which are possible, but hopefully you have got at least the starting point, and I can send you some more details into a follow-up links. So that should be giving you a little more idea on how Glue actually works and what other components which are there. Okay. All right, I'll stop here and I'll give everyone few minutes to breathe and myself too. So I would be stopping here, giving you all 5 minutes. 45 minutes, you taught us a lot. Thank you. Good to hear that. So hopefully if this thing is clear and if we get time, I will be giving more demos in the future. But yeah, right now, let me put a 5-minute timer. And once we return, I would ask James to help us in understanding observability. So enjoy your break, everyone, and eat more sweets. I will be back with you in 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, James, all up to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashish.
I just shared
Hello.
your screen to stream.
Perfect.
You.
Thanks, Ashish. Well, hello, everyone. Good
James,
morning.
can I ask you one thing? Can
Of
you
course.
remove the bar which says stop sharing
Yeah,
to another window? That would be
thanks for
easy.
reminding
Thank
me,
you.
Ashish. I always forget to do
Makes
that.
sense.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good one. All right,
Cheers.
thanks.
No worries. So I do have a bit of a cough at the minute. So if I break down and start coughing, everyone, I am sorry during this. Yeah, I've been a bit ill in the last week. So this week, I'm not going to cover a specific serverless service as I have done in previous weeks. But what I wanted to cover as part of this serverless track is what, at least I think, is one of the most important things that you need to think about when you're designing or building any kind of serverless application, and that's observability. How do you understand what your serverless application is doing? And you might be thinking, why? One of the things when we talk about serverless is we say that all you need to worry about is your application code, and we as AWS can care about the rest, right? But that's what I kind of want to start with now. Start with, why do you actually need to worry about observability when it comes to your serverless application? And if you consider, let's start with a really simple example. If we consider an API that talks to Lambda and stores some data in DynamoDB, nice, simple serverless application. Okay. We have the ability to get and put items into our database. So a user comes in and puts an item in our database. Let's say that item's got an ID of 123. And then later the user comes back and gets that data. Happy days. They will get the data that they put into the database, right? Because they've just stored it. Because of this, we might have another system somewhere that's also getting data from DynamoDB. Maybe it's another Lambda function within the same service. Maybe there's just something else reading data from that database. It might be Glue. It might be Glue performing some kind of analytics against that database. Now, what if down the line somebody comes around and changes the value of item 123? The value changes to something different. Let's say it's ABC in this instance. Now, when this other system, let's consider it's Glue, comes back and gets that data is going to have changed. Now, sometimes you might not care that the data's changed. If this is like an order processing system or an e-commerce system, the data is going to change all the time. But sometimes you might care about why a piece of data changed. What is it that caused that change to the state of your system? And if you just deployed this system as it is right now, you would have absolutely no idea when that data changed, what caused it to change, where did the request come from that caused that data to change. And this is where monitoring starts to get really important, and monitoring your system to change, to see how things are changing with things like traces and logs and metrics. It allows you to understand the why of things happening in your system instead of just them happening and then at some point in the future something's changed that you didn't expect. So monitoring is important because it allows you to react to events and improve your system as you go forward. And I realize I've used the word observability and monitoring there interchangeably, and I'll come on to the difference between the two in just a second, because there is a difference between monitoring and observability. So monitoring allows you to be data driven about your system, look at the metrics of your system and detect things that are changing, detect anomalies, and work out why things are changing. So if we were monitoring this system we've just been talking about, we could then monitor it to understand, another API request came in that caused our data to change. Okay, so that's monitoring. Monitoring is quite reactive. Monitoring is you look at some data that your system's putting out and you can use that to choose to make a decision. Now, observability is slightly different, and observability gets incredibly important in serverless systems. And observability is more about asking questions of your system, being able to go into your system and answer any question that you might have. So let's consider a serverless system that's a bit more complicated now, because remember, these serverless applications have lots and lots of small pieces that are all communicating asynchronously. So let's say we have a request that comes in from API Gateway, Lambda does some work and publishes an event to EventBridge. We've built an event-driven architecture here, so there's an SQ connected to EventBridge. Lambda takes some data off the queue, stores it in DynamoDB, and then something fails right at the very end. But it only fails for 1 in 10,000 requests that come in. So your traditional monitoring way of doing things might not help you here. You might have metrics monitoring failures, but it's not going to tell you what is it about that 1 in 10,000 requests that is different that causes it to fail. You might have logs as well, but then if you've got 10,000 requests and you're trying to find that one that failed, it can get really, really difficult if you've got these humongous amounts of logs stored in something like CloudWatch. So the ability to be able to ask questions of your system is just, I can't explain how important it is when it comes to serverless applications, because they are distributed, because they are so loosely coupled. Understanding what caused, for example, a given Lambda function to trigger and where that data came from is incredibly important. Observability rewards curiosity. It allows you as a developer to be really curious about your system, go in and ask questions, be proactive with your debugging, go in and have a look. And it makes it really easy to onboard to a system. So although we add observability for debugging purposes, if you imagine you've just joined a new organization and you can make a request into the system and then actually go and look at exactly how that request flowed through your system, it makes it really easy to get on board with a new piece of technology or a new service, because you've got the ability to trace that request through your system. And because you can ask questions, it gives you a much faster resolution. It minimizes the mean time to WTF, is how I would like to refer to that. That's not my phrase, but it's quite a good one. It minimizes the amount of time it takes, because sometimes you might find in systems that debugging is done on intuition. It's done on experience. I might have been working on a system for 10 years, so I know that Redis, the cache, has caused the problem. But if you're a new developer coming to the system, you don't have that intuition. You don't have that knowledge. So being able to go in and just be a detective and ask questions about your system to understand how the system works is really, really important, both for debugging and for a monitoring and ongoing improvement perspective. So this is so important for distributed systems, and serverless is about as distributed as you can get. So serverless is distributed in a sense that you've got lots and lots of services all talking to each other. A traditional monolithic application might just run on a single EC2 instance or a set of EC2 instances. The API, the Lambda, the compute, and the database might all be on a small number of instances. Serverless is massively distributed between all these different services that are all plugging together and working together to help you build something. But also within the services themselves, serverless is distributed. Within Lambda, if you think back to week one when we talked about Lambda, each execution environment for a Lambda function will only ever process one request at any one time. So that means if you get 10 requests into Lambda at the same time, them 10 requests are distributed across 10 separate execution environments. Scale that up to 1 in 10,000 requests, and it's massively, massively distributed, both between services and within a given services. Good point on X-Ray. I am going to get onto X-Ray in just a second, but you're beating me through my presentation now. So I know I said I've been using the words observability and monitoring interchangeably. So I just wanted to start with some definitions now. And the first two definitions I've pulled out, I've just pulled these straight from Googling define monitoring and define observability. So monitoring allows you to check the progress or quality of a system over a period of time. It keeps a system under review. this is the like I said, the Wikipedia, the Google definition. Compare that to observability, and observability is a measure of how well the internal states of a system can be inferred from knowledge of that system's external outputs. Now, when I read these two definitions, I thought that does not make a lot of sense. So I've actually put my own definitions of monitoring and observability in here as well. So how I think of monitoring is using some predefined outputs to review how a system is performing. It's a reactive approach to debugging. Things like metrics, outputting metrics from your system. You need to define the metric that your system is going to output before you know you need it. You need to kind of guess what the metric is that you need before you need it, and that can be really hard. So monitoring is valuable, monitoring is important, and it's more important when you're doing more, EC2 based, CPU memory based systems. But monitoring can be quite reactive, whereas observability is much more proactive. You're absolutely right. Nothing is impossible. It's proactive. So observability allows you to answer questions about your systems that you didn't know you needed to ask. A good observability strategy will allow you to just dive into your system and start to analyze your system in ways that you didn't know you need. It's much more proactive because you can just go in at any time and start to ask questions of your system. So that's the key difference, at least in my mind, reactive versus proactive. Observability allows you to be more of a detective with your system. And there's three, people commonly call these the 3 pillars of monitoring, or the 3 pillars of observability. There can be a lot more to monitoring observability than these 3 things, but these are the 3 key components. You've got traces, you've got logs, and you've got metrics. Traces allow you to follow a request through a system. Logs are the messages, the informational messages that your system might write. And metrics are typically numerical values that give you some information about your system. And we'll quickly dive into all 3 of these in some detail now. So when it comes to serverless, if you only added really good traces to your application, that was the only thing that you did, you will be taking a massive step forward in the observability of your system. So metrics and logs are really important. They're useful. Traces and understanding how a request flows through your system is, at least in my opinion, the most important thing to get right in your serverless applications. So traces are, there's some terminology around traces that I'll just go into now. So a trace is the end-to-end flow of a request through your system. So that might be, within a single service, you might implement tracing across all of the microservices in your system, but a trace is the complete end-to-end of a request. Within a trace, you have what are called segments or spans. You may see these called spans. And a segment is an individual portion of this trace. So you can see here, we've got a segment for API Gateway, we've got a segment for Lambda, for SNS and Dynamo, and then for that final Lambda at the end. And then within a segment, you can also have what are called subsegments. And subsegments are things you can add in your application code to trace specific parts of what your application is doing. So you can see here, we don't have any subsegments for API Gateway or Dynamo because we can't instrument the internals of DynamoDB, but within our Lambda functions, we can add some specific subsegments to our code. And of course, as somebody's just called out, AWS X-Ray is the service that allows you to do this. It's a distributed tracing system that allows you to follow requests through your system and actually use that for analysis and debugging. An X-ray looks something like this. If you look at a given trace within X-ray, this is a really well instrumented trace. You can see we've got our create orders function. Within that function, we've got our handler. We've got some instrumentation within our code where we've got, let's find my mouse. We've got, we're cleaning up some products so that we can see this validate method in our code is taking quite a lot of time. We can see DynamoDB was really fast. So we can get some really interesting information about the internals of our Lambda function and how requests flow through the system. Traces and segments can have a number of additional things added to them. So you can add annotations to your traces in X-Ray, and annotations are simply key value pairs that you can filter on, you can query against. Now, this is immensely powerful because this then allows you, if you think back to our 1 in 10,000 error, we've got 1 in 10,000 requests are failing. We can use these annotations to start to query what is it about that 1 in 10,000 request that causes this problem. We might store things like the user ID, the cart ID, if this was an e-commerce system, the value, the write units that DynamoDB used. We might store all of these additional pieces of data as annotations against our traces, and we can then use that to filter on. Remember when I said observability is about asking questions of your system? Annotations allow you to do that, to filter your traces based on given criteria. Metadata, very similar to annotations. You can add metadata to your traces. Metadata can't be queried. Annotations can, is the key difference. And then X-Ray automatically starts to monitor for errors, things like 500 errors, 400 errors, that will automatically get added to your traces. So we can use X-Ray both for what I would call top-down and bottom-up debugging. So by top-down, what I mean is that we can look at the traces across our entire system. So what I've done here is I've got a set of traces, and I've identified that there are 3 traces in my system, 3 specific requests that have got a much higher response time than other requests. So I'm starting from the top down here. I'm looking across my entire system and saying these 3 traces are much slower. What I can then do is I can then double click into that and say, look, here are the 3 traces that are anomalous or slightly different to anything else. So I've got one here that's taking 10 seconds, 9 seconds, and 7 seconds, right? From here, this is where I would then say this can be bottom up, in a sense that now we're into an individual trace. We're looking at a specific request flowing through our serverless application. And we're now looking at this specific request, and we can see that there's this one function or one component of this request that took a lot longer than other requests. We get this really nice service map if you use X-Ray, where you can actually see all of the different things that are talking to each other, all of the different components involved in fulfilling that request. So now we've gone, right, we've got our whole system, we've found these 3, we've gone into one specific request. Now we've found a specific component within that specific request that's taking 7.6 seconds. So our overall trace, our end-to-end was 10 seconds. This one bit took 7 seconds. That's a high proportion of our total request. And then we can double click again and we can go in a level deeper and actually look at the trace for that individual Lambda function. And we can see when we look at this trace here that this Lambda function is making a call to a remote API. And you can see that where it says remote over on the far right-hand side, just there. And that remote API request is taking 7.6 seconds. So we've now started from our whole system, found 3 requests, double-clicked, and found the very specific thing that's causing problems. And there are SDKs for X-Ray, so you can really easily add this instrumentation into your Lambda function code. So we've got this line up at the top here, this capture AWS. This will automatically now instrument all calls to AWS APIs. And then we can start to add in our application code, we can add these specific annotations. So you see this is an e-commerce example, and we're adding the item ID as an annotation. We can now use that in our traces to filter and understand what is going on in our systems. Like I said, asking questions of our system to understand what is going wrong. A whole range of services integrate natively with X-Ray. So things like API Gateway, Lambda, Event Bridge, these things can all be used with X-Ray natively with very little configuration from your perspective. I spent a lot of time talking about traces there, and I've probably talked about traces more than I will about logs and metrics, because like I said, when it comes to, any kind of distributed system, let alone serverless, where it's with these really loosely coupled components, tracing and understanding how requests flow through your system is, again, I can't stress how important it is to understand that and get data on that you can use. So when it comes to logs, logs are really useful. Like I said, when you get to really high scale and you've got lots and lots and lots and lots of logs, they can become a little bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And that's where it gets really important to structure your logs in the right way. So with Lambda, anything you write in your code to the console, if you use a print statement or a console write line, that will get written out to CloudWatch without you doing anything. But it will come out as really unstructured data, like the top line you can see here. So we've just got a message that's not really that useful. If we then start to use a structured format to our logs, that then opens up a whole range of different possibilities. So when it comes to logs and Lambda, always use some kind of structured format to your logs. Why we want to do that is so we can then start to query our log messages. It really helps you find that needle in that really large haystack if you've got the ability to run a query against your actual log messages. You can also create metrics from your logs, providing you've got them in a structured format. So you can use CloudWatch logs metrics filters, a component of CloudWatch, to actually generate metrics from your log messages. So you don't need to store a metric and the log. You store the log, and then CloudWatch can generate the metrics off the back of that. So really powerful. And you can also create metrics directly from within your logs. I'm going to come back to the embedded metrics format in just a second, so I'm just going to skip over that briefly, again, just in the interest of time. CloudWatch logs insights. So this is the most useful part when it comes to structured logging. So there's a component of CloudWatch called log insights, and that allows you to query against all of your logs, providing you've used a structured format for your log. So if you've got like a JSON format for your log messages, you can then query your logs. Now, if you start to include your trace identifier in your log messages, you can then cross-reference the trace to the actual log messages for that specific trace. So when it comes to logs, always use structured logs where possible, unless you're doing really simple things. And a whole bunch of services emit logs automatically. API Gateway can generate access logs. Step functions automatically generates logs for the execution and the history of an execution. So again, you get these logs with very little configuration. Again, metrics. I'll talk about metrics really quickly now. Use metrics carefully is my advice with metrics. They're a really useful tool to track trends in your system, but they're not so useful about finding root cause issues in your system. So they can be useful to identify there might be a problem, but to actually understand what is causing that problem can be tricky. There's actually a sticker I've got stuck on the back of my laptop that I can't pick up and show you, but the sticker says nines don't matter if your users aren't happy. So you might have a metric that says you've got 99.999% of availability, but if users are getting failed requests within that 0.001%, it doesn't matter. You can have all the nines that you want. So metrics can be a little bit misleading sometimes, but they can be useful. So we've got two different types of metrics primarily. We've got built-in metrics, and they're metrics like Lambda invocations, Lambda errors, number of throttles, and then we've also got business metrics. And I actually find business metrics can be really valuable a lot of the time. How many orders are getting created, what total value of their orders, how many high value orders have we got. These are really useful business metrics that you can get. And once you've got these metrics, you can use them to create alarms in your system. Again, with alarms, I always, when I speak to people about alarms, use alarms sparingly and carefully. there's nothing worse than I've worked in systems in the past where there's constantly alarms going off, and some of them are relevant and some of them aren't. And then you just start to ignore it because it's just noise. It's just things constantly happening. You ignore the Slack channel. So alarms, use them carefully, be really intentional about what the alarm is doing. If you're going to page somebody at 2 a.m., make sure that they get some actionable information about what is actually going wrong. But yeah, use alarms carefully. But once you've got metrics, you can then start to create alarms off the back of that. And then you can also start to populate dashboards once you've got these metrics. Again, useful to have. Again, can be misleading sometimes. So we've got, our get order latency function has got a P99 latency of 34.7 milliseconds. That's great, but if we don't have traces and logs alongside that, it's not useful. We know it's slow. We can't work out why. So metrics, again, are really helpful, but traces and logs are more valuable in terms of asking the questions of your system. There's a couple of tools that you can use in your Lambda functions to help you easily add tracing and logging and metrics, and that's what's called Lambda Power Tools. So I've referenced Python here. There's Lambda Power Tools libraries available for Python, for Node, for .NET, for Java. I think there's a Go one now. And these power tools just allow you to really easily add structured logging. So with power tools, you just get a logging object, and that will automatically structure your logs for you. You don't need to worry about it. You just do logger.log, write your message, and power tools will make that structured. It will turn that into JSON, and it will add a lot of additional information to that log message. So if you are doing anything with Lambda, normally if I'm building a Lambda, the first thing I do in whatever language I'm using is to install power tools and start using power tools, because it just simplifies a lot of this observability work. So just really quickly, best practices now. I'm really conscious of the time. Sorry, Jamila. When you're doing tracing, like I said, add annotations to your traces to make them, to add the context of what is it in that trace. So if you create a trace, a segment of your trace within your code, add some additional context to that, add some additional information. What's the user ID? What API endpoint did that request come in from? Add this information to allow you to ask the questions of your system. If you add lots and lots of annotations to a trace, you're almost not trying to guess what you're going to need in the future, because you've got everything you might need there and ready. And then when it comes to logging best practices, use structured logs so that you can query your logs. You want that ability to be able to go back over your logs and search for a specific trace ID or a specific order number or a specific user ID. Without some kind of structured logging format, you won't be able to do that. If you've just got standard logs, it becomes a lot more difficult. So traces, make sure you've got a lot of annotations and a lot of context about the request. Logging, be structured, be intentional, and include as much additional information in there as possible. One last thing I will say before I hand over to Jamila. I've just finished reading this book. It's sat in front of me on my desk. So this is a really awesome book by three people called Charity Majors, Liz Fong-Jones, and George Miranda. They work at a company called Honeycomb. The book's free. With that QR code and the link there, you can download the book for free from their website, an ebook. If you're interested in observability and learning more and understanding how you can add observability to your system, I would really recommend grabbing that QR code, and I'll drop the link in the Twitch chat in just a second. But like I say, it's free. It's a no-brainer. Go and read about observability, learn about observability, because with serverless applications, it is so important to get right. So I know I've not covered anything technically serverless today. I promise I'll get back to that next week. But I just thought this was a really important thing to add to talk about how you can start to understand what's going on within your system. But yeah, thank you. Any questions, as always, please drop them in the chat. I'll be around for till the end of the session, or reach out on LinkedIn, as always. Yeah, and I believe Jamila is now going to take over. Or Ashish. Hello, Ashish. You're on mute, Ashish. You're on mute, Ashish.
Sorry for that. Yeah, I need a cup of tea now. All right. Thanks for that, James, and thank you so much for taking time. I'll add Jamila to the stream, and we have an interesting guest today, and Jamila would lead the conversation. So, welcome, Jamila. Thank you for being
Great.
here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, James. Your session was awesome. I learned a lot personally. And Ashish, of course, no need for me to say that you're our technical guru by explaining with all the analogies. So I'm happy to be here. And thank you, everyone, for bearing with us until the end of the session. We have a guest speaker today. His name is Christian, who is here. Hi, Christian. I hope I'm pronouncing and saying your name correctly.
Yes,
correct?
It's good. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Yeah, of course. Our pleasure. So I will just quickly say how I know Christian and how I decided to involve him. So when I joined AWS, we were in the same internal training together. And I remember we were building a capstone project together. Back in that time, I was very newbie. I was very nervous. I didn't know how to build and like how to get my hands dirty. But Christian was very supportive and helpful during the project. And I remember his ambition saying that, hey, one day I want to build something my own. Which kind of got stuck with me. And since then, I kept an eye on your activities, Christian, internally and externally as well on LinkedIn. And recently, I saw some changes over from Christian's side, and I decided why not to invite him to the session to talk about your background. What did you do in AWS, before AWS, and what you're doing now? So over to you, Christian.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamila. Yeah, so I indeed, we met in that training. That was when I first started in my role as specialist SA at AWS. But I should start with my background. So I started my career back like 15 plus years ago, back in the university as a Linux sysadmin. And for a few years, I've been in the university just playing with Linux systems, and there was a lot of fun, trying all sorts of things. Eventually, after I finished university, I was hired at Nokia, where I was again sysadmin, building things in the data center for developers. And it was DevOps before it was known as DevOps. And a few years later, in Nokia, they were trying to sell this part of Nokia. So it was the location business of Nokia, and Nokia tried to focus on networking gear. So that's when also they sold the devices business to Microsoft. And as they were trying to sell this, we were already for a year or so in AWS. So I started around 2013 with AWS, and this was like a year or so later. And there was a lot of pressure to cut costs in that part of the business to make it more appealing to prospective buyers. And basically, I was always like this kind of techie who was trying to build things, to automate all sorts of things. And I got an idea for a tool that would allow us to optimize the cost using Spot instances. So at the time, we were using auto-scaling groups, and basically the idea was to make it easy to adopt Spot instances in existing groups by replacing their instances with Spot clones. And you essentially, you had something running in the account. I built it with Lambda and with Go, back when there was no support for Go in Lambda. So I did it was a really fun project to build these things. And basically out of this, it became a pretty popular open source project called Autospotting. And that was started around 2015 and open source in 2016. So I was still at here, and I was trying to build like a side business offering like support for this tool. And yeah, so that was not really working out. And I realized that it was very easy to deploy, and people didn't really need support. I also was struggling to be visible and promote it and do all sorts of marketing things. So at the time, I got this call from some AWS recruiter saying they would like to hire me in AWS at professional services. And since I was trying to build this professional services business, I thought, yeah, maybe that's a fun place to learn the ropes of being a professional services consultant. And maybe one day I could do this on my own again after I had this failure. So I joined that role. I was in that role for about a year. But as soon as I joined AWS, I was approached by a bunch of people from the Spot service team, because my tool was pretty popular in the space, and they knew me from before joining. So they were starting to involve me in customer conversations. They involved me in meetings with their product people. So basically, with the service team, I got quite close from before joining the team. And yeah, eventually they offered me to change teams. So I joined the Spot service team as specialist SA for Spot. And that's when I met Jamila for the first time, and we had that project together. So I was working in that team for about 2 years, and got pretty familiar with Spot and Graviton. I started covering Graviton. So for about a year and a half, I was the main contact for Spot and Graviton in EMEA. And after a while, focused on Germany. So basically, it was really fun role, and I was learning every day something new. But after 2 years, I thought, okay, now I think I'm ready to go back to my own thing. And yeah, as of almost two months ago, I doubled down on my cost optimization tools. So I left AWS, and now I'm building this this little business on cost optimization tooling. And I have the same tool, auto spotting, which I evolved a bit over the last couple of months. So I kept evolving it also while at AWS, but it was relatively slow. There was not so much time for that, but now I kind of doubled down on it. And yeah, I used a lot of these things that as an Amazonian, you get to learn, working with customers and reaching out to customers to see what their pain points are, and building, working backwards from their needs. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. And also all about being visible. So I've started publishing pretty much on a weekly basis stuff on LinkedIn. So I have this newsletter. And I
get an email notification that you published on a solopreneurship, you're calling it, right? The weekly newsletter and all your journey. And I'm reading it sometimes, and I'm feeling, oh man, you never know, right? With whom you're working one day, that person or that product or that business can become a next Meta, can become next big thing. So when I read it, I literally read with that passion that I hope one day this guy will become that big business. And then I will say, one day, back in times when I was young, I was in the same team, and we were working together in the same project. So I really see a lot of potential, and I really wish you luck with your business. I'd like to kind of chip in there and ask, what are you currently doing with autospotting.io? So I see on your name, which is great that you put it there so people can see. What is exactly the business model like? How? So you mentioned that you were doubling down and you are putting all of your efforts in that product. What is the product by itself? What are the services you are providing to the customers? And what are you learning in the meantime? And what was your experience in AWS, which kind of helped you to top up your experience and say that, okay, this is now time. I'm ready to be independent, and I know what I'm going to do.
Right. I mean, I hope there was such a long list of things you mentioned there, but basically I'm starting, as I said, to work using inputs from the customer. So that's a very important Amazonian principle, working backwards. And based on that, I've seen customers who are like struggling to like when it came to the way they were purchasing the tool. So it was open source, and now I put it on the marketplace, on the AWS marketplace, and I'm charging a percentage of the savings that the tool generates. It's 5% over of the difference between spot price and on-demand price. So I give spot instances replacing on-demand instances, and they are typically up to 90% cheaper. I mean, depending on instance type and so on. But I'm trying to extract a little bit of that value and make a living out of it. And yeah, it's on the marketplace. It's probably the first, if not among the first few applications that are serverless on the AWS marketplace. And yeah, I had to, it's not really supported by the marketplace at the moment, but I figured out a bunch of workarounds to make it work. Like historically, I had workarounds when it came to Lambda. Like I built it from Lambda from day one with Golang, and Golang was not even supported by Lambda. So built all sorts of workarounds over time, as it was this cool side project of mine that I could try things out. But yeah, now that's kind of how it works. And
let me quickly ask here. Yeah. Sorry, let me quickly ask here. Let's say I'm a customer and I want to use Spot instances. And I do have lots of customers who are really keen to use Spot instances, but they are worried about cost, or they might lose their instances, etc. How or what is the instance, or what is the use case I can pitch your product, which I would happily do? Why not, right?
Yeah, so the main use case is when it comes to adopting Spot at relatively large scale. So think of customers who have an existing configuration, let's say in the dozens or hundreds of auto-scaling groups. It works only with auto-scaling groups, so it's not really supporting the like things without auto-scaling groups, so it relies on auto-scaling groups. But if you have like hundreds of them, the fact is that if you want to adopt Spot, you have to go to every single group and tweak the configuration and set a number of instance types there. You want to have diversification in place. So basically, for every single group, you have to go and configure the set of instance types that you allow for that group. And the way it works with auto spotting, starting from an on-demand configuration, it looks at the configuration of the group, and it automatically diversifies the list of instance types, starting from that instance type configured initially on the group. And the only thing you need to do is tag the group with a value, and that tag could also be done by taking a tag that exists already on the group. So the application is configurable. You can say tag, like any groups that have this tag, replace them with Spot and put only like 40% of the capacity as Spot. So, and all this thing is configured outside of the groups, and it makes it easy to adopt Spot at scale. And at my former employer, what we did at some point was we had this large organization with hundreds of AWS accounts, and they had all the development teams given a production account and a development account. And at some point, what we did was we just went to all the development accounts and deployed this software and made it take everything in those accounts and convert to Spot. So literally overnight, those hundreds plus of accounts became optimized with Spot. And since they were development, like there were a few issues with some of the applications, but most of them didn't really cause any business impact, and the savings were really massive for that relatively small change. So yeah, that's kind of how it works, and that's the main benefit. Nowadays, I mean, out of this experience in the spot service team, I got a few learnings, and I'm trying to improve the software so it gives better like diversification. And like what I'm doing now is adding support for ordering instance types by generation, and focusing on providing this additional value, like giving priority to newer instance types that are faster and cheaper compared to the older ones, which maybe if you're using capacity optimized by default, you may get an older instance type, which is not so performant, but yeah, the price could be a bit better, but the fact that it's not performant will in a big group will cause like more instances to be launched and so on.
That's amazing.
So yeah,
that sounds really cool, and I see lots of comments on the chat that people are impressed, and I am impressed as well. Like, I didn't know the details and all the history behind it, which is really, really cool. Let me ask another question. So I know now the use case. I'll definitely keep in mind. What if some of the people got to know how the product works? Can they reach out to you, for example, like our BeSA participants or people who just figured out or found out your product? Can they reach out to you personally on LinkedIn asking for consultation, or do you have any price probably maybe for consultation, or how does it look like?
No, I'm actually very open to talking to all sorts of people. I have on my LinkedIn, I have this link for my calendar, so anybody can book a half an hour call and have a chat. I'm trying to talk to all sorts of people for like partnerships, potential prospects. So yeah, I'm happy to talk if there are any questions.
That's amazing. And are you planning any partnership with AWS directly, or are you already our partner, which is cool? Even I can invite you to speak to my customers.
Well, I think what I've seen is you need to have a company entity in order to be like an AWS partner from the partner network. And since I'm just one guy, I don't have a company yet. I'm like not really applicable for me. But yeah, I mean, considering my background, I still have relationships with a bunch of people from the spot service team, and yeah, a lot of like a big network of SAs that I helped during the couple of years I've been SA. So yeah,
that's amazing.
More than happy to.
Yeah, amazing. That's awesome. Do you have any plans to scale your product? Is your product specifically currently used in EMEA, or are you planning to scale across the continents?
It's available worldwide. So anybody who has access to the marketplace can go there, and in 5 minutes, you can go get started with it, tag your first group, and see it running. What so this product has been in the works for more than 5 years, and there is not so much more that I could do about. I mean, there are things that I could do, but at some point there is like diminishing returns. So what I'm thinking, instead of building more on this particular product, I mean, I will build things based on customer feedback, but I'm thinking to build additional tools for cost optimization. So there are all sorts of things. Like I've started working on something for EBS volumes, and I'm considering all sorts of other ideas. And yeah, let's see what I can actually build. But I'm kind of inspired by all this indie hacker community that are people who like on their own do like build a tool that solves a certain problem, and then they live out of that, and they build these on like once a month or so. They build a new tool. I mean, I'm not that fast yet, but I'll try to build more and more of these little tools that do a certain cost optimization, taking actions for optimizing things. So I have the second one for EBS volumes. Like you install it in the account, and it automatically converts all your GP2 volumes to GP3. So there are a lot of these little volumes that could be optimized for like 20% of savings and better performance by converting them with a single API call. And my tool does that continuously. And yeah, you still get those. Unfortunately, you still get those volumes launched, even if you launch the default AMI, like the last version of the Amazon Linux AMI. It still provisions a GP2. So it's surprising how slow people adopt these things, although it's like now a year and a half or 2 years since it's out. So yeah, these kind of tools I'm trying to build next.
That's amazing. That sounds really exciting, and I guess you are the only one who is who has these ideas and who is building. So you don't have a team currently, right?
No, I just have somebody who helps me with marketing. So he does this outreach to former users and potential users now, and yeah, trying to get them to try it out and see how it works and report back.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think Ashish has a question. Ashish, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks, Christian, for sharing. It's an interesting tool, and obviously it can save a lot of money. Now, my question is on your journey from being a AWS person to being an entrepreneur. How the sides are different? Like why you chose that, and what you miss about AWS, or what is good in current role. So I want to know the difference of the opinion from your perspective.
Yeah. So basically, I always wanted this, and I kind of, for me, it was like a stopgap being at AWS, and I kind of, on the long term, I always wanted to go on my own eventually. And once I thought I'm ready, I left and started this like this journey. What is something that's very important in both roles is having visibility. I mean, being visible and doing things in public and talking to people, and like this part of the role as an essay. I mean, probably I didn't do it as much as I'm doing it now. So now I really double down on making content, being all over the place, and yeah, that's something that is very useful also within AWS. It's also about this like having no anxiety of talking to people, which I used to have before. So I'm quite introvert from, like, my nature is introvert, and I always struggled to reach out and talk to like potential customers or whatever. But as I was working at AWS and SAs have a lot of customer calls, I had like every week I had like 2 or 3 calls with customers, and I got so fluent in front of them that I no longer have this anxiety. And that was also a thing that I wanted to learn from this role and apply it. And I really apply it nowadays. I talk every other day with startup CEOs and yeah, all sorts of executives, and so I have no problem with that anymore. What else am I missing anything from your question? Or
No, that's covered it now. So being an entrepreneur, like you need to be little disciplined. That's my guess is. What are other things you have to be worried about? Because some of our participants may be looking for similar type of things. Maybe they are currently in their job, they have idea of a product, they may want to move forward. So what should be the top advice you could give to them?
yeah, in both cases you have to be deliberate on what you're like, following your goals, your career goals. Think of on the long term where you want to get, and yeah, it's all about like being disciplined and doing the right things and trying to see what are the right things for your role, and yeah, focus on those. But as an entrepreneur, I mean, as an SA, it's a pretty well-defined role. So if you go and talk to more senior people, you can see like what is the path that you should be following, and there are some clear alternatives on what kind of career progression you can have. like from the generalist SA, you may go for a specialist SA or whatever. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to forge it all by yourself, and there are so many things you can try, and yeah, you have to be very careful where you invest your time and what are you focusing on. So you have much more freedom, but also with freedom comes responsibility and a lot of things that you have to say no to and focus on the right things.
That's awesome. There is an interesting question in the chat. Can we help you in some sort of way voluntarily? So see, people are getting excited about the awesome product that you are building and your future products as well. So people are keen to help to get some experience. So what would be your answer?
I mean, thank you so much for offering. Any sort of help is more than welcome. I mean, if you're AWS, probably you're not really allowed to go and promote my tools to customer. I mean, I don't know how it works, but basically, if you're not in AWS, I recommend you to try it out and report if you find any issues, any feedback. Yeah, all sorts of these things are very, very useful. Auto spotting is still open source, so I have the source code is still available. I didn't really publish the latest version as an open source, but I will probably eventually do it. So one way you could help is looking at issues, maybe coming up with filing some issues or even pull requests. And yeah, more than happy to consider those and to be like, if you're becoming part of the community, yeah, that would be really helpful, and I'm very thankful for that.
Great, and I think they can reach out to you on LinkedIn and book some time. So please feel free to do that. We're all here to support each other, especially entrepreneurs. So feel free to do that. Feel free to share on LinkedIn. I will share on LinkedIn as well. And this recording will be available on YouTube as well. If there is no questions, I won't waste anyone's time anymore. It was lovely to meet you again, Christian. I wish you best of luck in your entrepreneurship career. I wish your product to prosper, to be next big thing, where your ex-colleagues will look at it and say proudly that I worked with this man. I know how bright he is, and his product will be awesome. So I hope one day you will get there. Even if you don't have that ambition, I'm just sending you that energy. So you can kind of, once you log off, you will have full of energy and you will go and do things that you were planning to do a long time, but you never get to the point that you have to do it. So thank you for joining. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jamila, and I'm very excited to be, for all these nice words and for what's coming next. And I'm trying to see how to make it work. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting journey. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you too. And feel free to tap on our BeSA network. I mean, we have a LinkedIn group. You can post there if you need people who are independent. I mean, not from AWS, can test or any sorts of engagement. Yeah, so feel free to tap on our BeSA network as well. Feel free to reach out to me as well if you have any questions, any needs from my side. I'll be happy to support, and I bet our BeSA community as well will be happy to support.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, thanks support. A lot. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you, Ash. Come along. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Christian. It was nice to interact with you and to know about it. And I am impressed, to be honest, like being in a safe place, but thinking like, hey, I need to steer off. I need to do something which interests me, which I have a long-term goal for. That's impressive. Not everyone is bold enough to take those steps. So all the best. And we hope to see you again in some more session, sharing more of the wisdom. So thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next week, have a good one, and hopefully, we will catch you up. Have a good Diwali and celebrate time with your friends and family. Thank you so much. Take care. See you
Thank
next week.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.